y'all. It's K-Bird Tweets, and this is Peace, Love, and Baseball. Welcome to Season 2 of Peace, Love, and Baseball. Yeah, it is the first episode of Season 2, which means that Peace, Love, and Baseball is officially 1 year old. Happy 1 year of podcasting, K-Bird Tweets. You did it. Yeah, since 1 year ago, we, and by we, I mean me, I, with many guests I have been joined by, have put out 50 episodes since the beginning of September of 2022. So I had to do a little research into, some podcast statistics, just to take a moment to step back and see what we have to be proud of here. So according to podcastindex.org, for 2023 podcast statistics, only about 18% of all podcasts have more than 10 episodes. Yeah. And less than 4% of all podcasts are putting out a weekly episode. So Peace, Love, and Baseball is in the 4%, y'all. That's pretty neat. I'm going to be proud of that. And I'm proud of myself for going for it, and even more so for sticking with it. So thank you so much for listening and engaging, and a huge shout out to all of my guests in our first year. It has been a lot of fun. Looking back on the past 50 episodes, there's a lot to look back on, a lot to consider, a lot to appreciate. So, I recognize, appreciate, and celebrate the consistency in just showing up week over week. This is actually a part of what I love about baseball, like over other sports, and the important parallel that I believe baseball has to life, and really a big part of what inspired me to start this podcast. And a lot of what we talk about, the value of all the ups and downs, just the consistency and perseverance that it takes to get through 162 games, right? It has so many lessons that translate to how we show up and live day to day. So, not every episode that I've put out is something that I think is like the best ever, or is, going to change somebody's life. But I am proud of each and every one. And I know that I showed up and I gave, the best that I had that week and in that moment for each episode. I'm not hitting home run every episode, but hey, half the audience is probably more interested in seeing a pitcher's duel anyway, right? Sometimes laying down the bunt is just as impressive and effective. I also realize more and more about like why I love baseball. So it's been cool to kind of explore more of, the why behind me having that attachment to it. Because if you've listened to certain episodes, that like I never played baseball. And, I've never been actively involved in the sport as an athlete. But what I love about it and how my passions and knowledge for like fitness, wellness, authenticity, leadership, performance, and entertainment are so aligned with my love and appreciation for this specific sport has been something that's really come out through this podcast and through many of the different episodes and topics that we've spent time pontificating on. So Peace, Love, and Baseball just makes more and more sense to me week over week. In many of the episodes, baseball and things happening in the world of professional baseball are used as a vehicle for, a much larger conversation because of how copacetic everything is in baseball, with everything in life. By exploring the inner workings of the game, like the human side of the players, the relationships within the game, on and off the field, there is always a parallel and lesson for every walk of life, whether you're a baseball fan or not. I love it. One of the things that I also firmly believe in is that every person is intelligent and gifted in their own unique way. And that's something that I realized that I think a lot about and is really important to me the more and more that I invited guests and just had a lot of interesting conversations with them and was genuinely excited to ask them questions. So I love to see things from other people's perspectives. And my dream world is one where like we can all go into professions that directly pull from our own unique intelligence and gifts. And some of us are lucky enough to find lines of work at any point in time, even if not for the long haul in life where, we do feel that way. But because different types of intelligence and skills are valued differently in our world, it becomes more and more challenging. I think it's only becoming more and more challenging. Anyway, that's a big combo for maybe another day. But my point is here is that I love finding people who are experts or who have a lot of understanding and passion for things that I might know very little about, or even just have a different, side of the experience on. Even talking to other fitness professionals is really interesting because there's so many different layers and perspectives, and there's no way that you could possibly just know everything there is to know about anything. So I love having those conversations with people and trusting that they're going to have something that I can really learn from. And there's value to take from every person and every conversation and every interaction if you're looking for it. And you know what? If nothing else, even if not one single episode had one single listen, I had 23 conversations with guests this past year that I simply would not have had otherwise. And to me, like that's pretty cool. It's valuable. And I'm really glad I did it. Okay, so how do we kick off season 2? Well, in the pilot episode 1 of season 1, I shared just a little bit about my intention for the podcast of what peace, love, and baseball means to me. And quite honestly, what I shared in that episode was about all I knew of what I really wanted peace, love, and baseball to be. And part of why I hadn't started it sooner was that I didn't have this like really definitive message, or I didn't feel like it was maybe niche enough to catch on. And that may still be true to some extent, but I do feel like I've gotten more and more clear on what it is, what I want out of it, and what I want people to get out of it. So obviously we've had a lot of episodes about baseball, but a lot of the episodes or parts of episodes have lots of other content as well, from fitness to education to food to hair care to healthcare, self-care, entertainment. We've covered a lot, is my point. So today we're going to recap some of what we learned and shared in season 1 and set our sights to keep expanding on that in season 2. So we're going to go through the pillars of our podcast: peace, love, and baseball, and give you the rundown of episodes that you might remember or that you can revisit, especially if you're a new listener. Certain things might pique your interest, and you can go back and listen to, a specific episode or two and kind of catch up. And it's really just cool to look back and see all that we've accomplished and the insight that we've shared and the great conversations that we've had in the past year. So let's start with peace. I initially set out for the peace in peace, love, and baseball to be like our health and wellness focus, which I would also consider like that includes our relationships with ourselves and each other and the world around us. So these are some of the episodes that kind of highlight that. Certainly not the only episodes that you hear it in, because I honestly think there's peace, love, and baseball in every single episode. But in episode 4, you met Coley, who is a dear friend of mine, and we talked with her on her pursuit of her master's degree in therapy. We had a lot of great discussion around just the practice of being your best self and being the kind of person that inspires others in that as well, and ways to, best be there for others while also, ultimately looking out for number one. And Coley is someone who models that really well. And huge congrats are due to her because Coley is now officially a licensed therapist. So huge congrats to Coley. Go back and listen to that episode, and, you can say that you heard her and listened to her deep insight as she was just beginning her journey But I love every conversation that I ever get to have with her. And I'm glad that we have that one on recording to live on forever. In episode 6, you met Molly, who owns and operates her own fitness brand and company called MFit Workouts. And what I love specifically about Molly's approach to fitness, and why I knew she was the person that I wanted to have kind of come on and initially broach this topic, is I've worked in the fitness industry for about a decade, and I made the choice a couple years ago, and really just in the last year, to like fully remove myself from the industry, because so much of the way that it is talked about, the way that it is sold to us, is not something that aligns with like what fitness means to me and what I want to share about it to people. And the message of just inclusivity and that like feeling good is the priority. And it's really about like living well, living healthy. And that's not anything that is drastic or wildly specific or, again, exclusive to any gender or age or body type or anything. And Molly's approach to fitness is just that. It's something that fits into your life. It is something that will change your life and, be a part of your lifestyle, but be super sustainable and actually make a huge impact in your day-to-day and mentally, physically, emotionally, all the good stuff. So since we talked with Molly in episode 6, she is now a published author. Pretty cool. And she also just celebrated 10 years since the start of her business. So huge congrats to Molly and MFit Workouts. And if you are looking for even just the first foot in the door on your fitness journey, it's an awesome place to start. If you're kind of stuck in a rut and you need that motivation, that connection, I think she actually does complimentary consultations. So hit up her Instagram page and all the information is there, and sync up with Molly, because she's an awesome resource. And that episode will give you a great idea of the kind of person that she is and the kind of coach that she is. Then in episode 8, we talked about a lot of different things, but one of the things that we really dug into was the difference in food regulations in the US versus the UK with my sister, who lives in the UK. So that was kind of our first little dip into the nutrition world. And that's something that I definitely want to dive more into, because the same way that, again, like exercise doesn't have to be super restrictive or extreme, I feel exactly the same way about food, but it is so important as fuel and as a piece of the pie to living, a full, healthy, happy life. So looking forward to exploring that kind of topic a little bit more in season 2. We also shared fitness tracker best practices in episode 9. So whether you use a fitness tracker or maybe you've considered using one, that could give you some fun insight there. I put this episode 10 under our peace pillar as well, because in episode 10, we met John and Laura. They are a couple who share a love of baseball, but they shared with us about a lot of things baseball related as well, but they shared with us how they met and fell in love. And one of the things that I love about them and just the way that they live and share their life and their story is how they prioritize, family outings and activities that are so important for mental, emotional, and physical health of the whole family, and how making that a part, like a family thing, and having that support is such a big piece of it as well. So great conversation and great couple that we met and had a conversation with there. I even pulled out an episode on the week of Thanksgiving in episode 13. The COVID finally got me in November of 2022. It was the first and only time, fortunately, that I have had it. I was very sick, not great. But I did use that as an opportunity to revisit some of the best cold and flu relief, from like the best kind of foods that you can eat, to just sharing stuff that is particularly comforting and like makes you feel good when you're feeling really bad. So I'm not a doctor, but there's some good stuff there for you. In episode 16, we shared some best practices for dealing with stress around the holidays and family gatherings. We all feel it in one way or another, and I'm sure that's something we can dive into again this holiday season. In episode 17, we kind of kicked off the new year by picking the brain of DPT physical therapist Sarah, as she shared some of the life-changing work that she has done through her work of physical therapy. And she also shared just some good tips and tricks of like simple things that you can do to commit to in daily life to feel your best. And really in that being her intention behind wanting to go into that line of work. In episode 18, we met Danielle, who is a former collegiate athlete in rowing. And before I met Danielle, we actually met working at a fitness concept around the sport of rowing together. But I had never met someone who, like, I don't even think I met someone who had rowed on the water before, let alone done it at a competitive level. But she shares a lot of great insight on collegiate athletes transitioning to life post athletics. And, that's a conversation whether you were an athlete at the high school level or it was even just a really big part of your childhood. Maybe you did it into college. Certainly something that is so interesting to me in terms of, professional athletes who a lot of them, retire before they're even 30 years old, or even if they're 40, like they still got a whole lot of life to live. And she gives some interesting insight and a neat conversation around that, and just about how staying active looks different for her and for all of us from how we might initially be taught to be active, especially if you grew up as an athlete. Danielle shares a lot also on the benefits of rowing, which I am fully in support of, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to learn about when I did. So if it's not something that you know a lot about, that could be a great episode to listen into. And we have a good conversation around how, like, you don't have to look a certain way to be active or to be an athlete, and how, athletics is really for everyone. Danielle also shares about the organization called Recovery on Water that she works with, which is a awesome organization that creates opportunities for cancer patients and cancer survivors to take an active part in their life and their recovery through rowing, and a rowing team, and how the sport really speaks to that and encourages that. So good stuff. In episode 20, I give a full breakdown on tracking macros and how this is different from dieting and deprivation. So again, I have a very basic nutrition certification. That's kind of the extent of where I feel like my scope is at in terms of like what I'm going to give you from a professional standpoint. So we'll certainly seek out some guests that can go even deeper into this conversation. But expanding on my general thought here is just that a lot of people are actually not eating enough, is what the tracking macros is kind of a good place to start for a lot of people. So the whole idea around that section of the episode is creating better eating habits that actually last, as opposed to doing like a fad diet once a year or once a decade, because it's simply unsustainable or too limiting, etc. So that's something that has worked for me, and I've helped other people have a lot of success with, because it's more about knowledge and habits and sustainability than deprivation. And it helps you make sure that you are fueling your body, which a lot of times we're simply not doing enough of. In episode 21, we have our friendly neighborhood beauty expert, Katie, and we focus all on skincare. I have personally taken multiple things that Katie talks about in this episode into my daily skincare routine. So I don't know if you can tell a difference, but she answered some listener questions on that as well that were really fun and educational. In episode 22, I share some of my favorite forms of heart healthy exercise that is not cardio. It's actually the type of workout that I did for myself this morning. It's called peripheral heart action training. So if you hate cardio, but you want to do something that's good for your heart and that can actually help you burn a lot of calories too, be really effective in a number of different ways, check out episode 22. And then in episode 24, we talk about different types of cardio interval training. So if you are a cardio fiend, do whatever speaks to you. Do whatever you're going to consistently do. Find the thing that makes you feel good, because that's the most important thing with the kind of exercise that you're going to do. We talk about different types of, cardio interval training that you can do, the difference between aerobic and anaerobic exercise, which one is right for you, what you can get out of it, all that good stuff. And I also gave some specifics into my time as a coach for a very popular fitness franchise. It's Orange Theory. And what my biggest takeaway is in terms of what you might want to take or leave from that particular workout and that style of workout. In episode 25, we talked to expert hairstylist Courtney and Rachel. And Courtney is your expert colorist, while Rachel is the expert stylist and works with more like specific hair textures. But again, another episode where I learned things that I, to this day, am using from that episode, from, their wealth of knowledge in their particular area of expertise. That's the way to do it, right? Who knows what qualifications these people on TikTok have? My people on Peace, Love, and Baseball have legitimate qualifications. That I can promise you, okay? In episode 34, we had my mom on for a little Mother's Day episode. She happens to be a career educator and an expert in child development. Especially towards the second half of her career, she's a special education teacher, but she really specialize and expand her professional expertise on like 3, 4, and 5-year-olds and child development. So we had a really cool conversation where she shared her insights on, our ever evolving world, but the effects that really has on our relationships with kids and their relationships with technology and the world around them, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, in our most recent episode 50, we talked with Stephanie, who is a principal of a K-8 school currently. And she also shares some really great perspective on how her education background ties into her parenting, how education is currently evolving, and a lot of valuable insight around the leadership conversation that I'm always passionate and into talking about, that goes far beyond the education space as well. Whew. All right. So that's just a little bit of the piece that we shared in the last year here at Peace, Love, and Baseball. Let's talk about love. Love. The love piece of Peace, Love, and Baseball comes in many ways, shapes, and forms, as love does, We've touched on everything from, my passion and love of performance to the entertainment industry and the things that we love to consume, to the passion-driven professions of so many of our guests. So that's, I think, one thing that I probably won't mention here as we kind of run through the episodes that are more love-focused. But every single guest that we had on was very passionate about the thing that we talked about. And man, don't you just love listening? I could listen to anyone talk about literally anything as long as it was something that they were really passionate about. Like seeing someone have that light in their eyes and in their face, and you can hear it in their voice. Those are the kinds of conversations that I love to have. Love. For example, in episode 2, you met our dear friend, Wesley McKinney, who is the frontman for the musical project called Validity. Since you met Wes, he has done a live show where he performed his entire last album live. And he also recorded and put out a new single that he produced in a studio where the likes of Celine Dion and Ray Charles, perhaps you've heard of them, have also recorded and produced music. Yeah. So if you haven't streamed Need You to Stay by Validity, it's linked in the show notes, and like all of our show notes, hit it. What are you waiting for? Cue it up right after this podcast. What I loved about that interview with Wes is the way he broke down the songwriting, like his process with it, because that's another thing that's just really interesting about talking to people who have different skills and different passions than you. Is you listen to a lot of songs. I listen to a lot of songs. I don't think a whole lot about like how they're written or where they come from and all that goes into them, because that's not a skill that I have. It's not something that I particularly am drawn to. And I am even a musician. So I think it's really cool to just get that peek behind the curtain, especially when it is, art that we so actively consume. And what I love about my friendship with Wes is how inspiring I think we are to each other in different ways and in different phases of life. We have been friends for far longer than either of us want to admit at this point, because hopefully you wouldn't even believe that we're as old as we've been friends for. But I just love his drive and his passion and his commitment to continuing to not only produce on his craft, but always work on it and find different ways to explore it. And he's always someone that I can go to when I'm like feeling stuck in a rut, or, I'm just not sure if it's worth putting out another podcast episode. I know he's going to convince me to do it and break it down with me, and is just always inspiring on a creative level. In episode 8, we talked to my sister Katie about her collegiate soccer experience. So this is the same episode where we did some of like the food regulation stuff, but we just talked about anything and everything with Katie. She's a good one to do it with. We talked specifically here about her collegiate soccer experience and how her passions ultimately led her to her career now as an events professional overseas, and how that really ties in with her love of sports and the culture around it, both, here in the US and across the whole world. Oh, and on episode 11, we did a gift guide episode, which was really fun. And it was a good way to just get into a thoughtful space of when you're looking for the perfect gift, whether it's around the holidays or birthday, really any time of year. So not only do we give like specific gift suggestions at a variety of price points in that episode, but we also talked about how to categorize and come up with thoughtful gift ideas and, share the love. In episode 12, we talked with Keith about his love, his true passion of fast food. And, most of us, I think, can relate at least at the right time of day, or, once or twice a year, I get that hankering. But we had some fun with a pre-Thanksgiving episode. We shared fast food specials for the family on the road, and some recipes for every phase of the holidays. So that's a little peace and love throughout that entire episode for you. Speaking of love, I shared my very own love story of how I met my husband. And, I know I'm maybe a little biased, but I do think it's a particularly good story. I really enjoy it in episode 14, and how that directly ties into our passion of acting and singing. We met in a show together, but it's definitely a better story than just that. It's not quite that simple. But then I also gave a little history lesson on the $1 Million Quartet. So spoiler alert, we met doing that show. But there's a lot more of the story than that. And there's a lot more to $1 Million Quartet than even just the songs from it, or even if you've seen the show. Like, there's a lot behind it that I will share, not only our love story, but the history behind that story and the show. In episode 23, this was a real winner, though. It was our Valentine's Day special. And we had Sarah Ann, who is now a weekly podcaster herself. It was her podcast debut. And Sarah Ann and I drafted out our top 10 dreamiest dudes in Major League Baseball. So I think that would be a really fun thing. We're definitely going to have to do it. Maybe we'll do it another Valentine's Day episode for the 2024 season. But yeah, that was really, really good time. Really fun episode. Just a fun, different perspective to, celebrate a top 10 list in sports. Episode 27 is all about passion-driven professions and the challenges surrounding that. And this is something that is very near and dear to me, something I think about a lot. Definitely a journey that I am still on. And I think we all are, to some extent, at some point with it. But what makes a professional? How sometimes we have to decide to separate our passion from what becomes our profession at times, and just a bigger discussion around all of that. Definitely something that I'm still working through. And like I said, we probably all are to some extent, and we always will be. It's always a good piece of conversation there. Episode 31 is one that I liked a lot. It was our vibes and leadership episode. And while it's very much centered around happenings in baseball, I'm going to put this in the love category, because what it really comes down to is relationships and leadership. Culture, connections, these are all things in general that I am very passionate about. And again, it's peace, love, and baseball. It's all peace, love, and baseball. On episode 36, we talk pros and cons of coffee and espresso. We put these two things that many of us love very dearly, head to head. Very important, passion-driven conversations happening here. On episode 38 it's special in that we do a London preview with my sister and her boyfriend Andy, who is native to the UK. And while it was specifically around the MLB London series that we were like planning to attend and getting excited about and all that good stuff, a lot of what we talk about is not specific to that series or even to baseball. And it's really just fun for anyone who is looking to travel to the UK, maybe to London specifically. A lot of good cultural highlights and differences in that discussion that are a lot of fun for anyone. Episode 40 was my Father's Day episode. And while it's certainly baseball heavy in that my dad and I discuss our shared love of the game, it's really love driven because, well, it's my dad and it's family. And it's a lot of it is just about how sports brings families together and, all that good loving stuff. In episode 48, I had the privilege of interviewing Hollywood director Jeff Celentano just a few weeks ago about his new movie, The Hill, which is now out in theaters. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. It is a baseball story, but is really about so much more. And we're also joined by Ricky Hill, who is the real life inspiration of the story that is told in the movie. And he is just such an inspiring figure himself that I personally had not heard about before. And I was really surprised that I hadn't. So it's a cool story. If you haven't heard, the story or about the man himself, and a very cool conversation around faith, purpose, determination, family, and so much more that connects us all in that interview that is highlighting the new film. All right. We made it to baseball. It's all baseball because baseball is everything. Okay. So there's pretty much some element of baseball in every single episode, to be honest. Even with our guests like Coley and Courtney and Rachel, who are like not baseball fans, we played some really fun games that if you are a baseball fan, so if you skipped those episodes because you were like, I don't really care about hair care, you will find a good laugh in, and I think you'll really appreciate the games and the conversations that we had with them around baseball. So check out episode 4 with Coley. She's going to do things like give you her own definition of what an RBI is and so much more. And she's brilliant and hilarious. So that played out exactly how I wanted it to. And in episode 25 with Courtney and Rachel, we played Would You Rather, MLB edition, where Courtney and Rachel had to decide things like, would you rather have a higher WAR or a higher ERA? Or would you rather hit a ground rule double or a fielder's choice? But, for the more hard-hitting baseball content, there was tons of it. There's tons of it. Let's dive in. So on episode 2, which we've already talked about with Wesley McKinney, Wes and I talk about how he fell in love with the game and the St. Louis Cardinals. He's a huge Cardinals fan too. And we dive into our speculation on the new rules of the game for 2023, which at this point they had just been announced this time last year when we recorded that episode. So it's fun to go back and listen now and hear what we anticipated and how it is ultimately translated into the game this year. Episode 3 is evergreen. It lives on in time. Episode 3 is our Albert Pujols career deep dive. This was mid-September of 2022 when Albert was, I believe, 2 home runs, the 2 that he ultimately ended up hitting at Dodger Stadium, away from hitting that 700 mark. So it was really fun to revisit all the highlights year after year of his career. And since I had just started the podcast, I also shared random little highlights of my life throughout each year of Albert's career as well, which was an interesting way to put in perspective for all of us Pujols fans, just how long we had been watching this man light up the baseball diamond. All of the things that have happened in my life from when Albert Pujols made his MLB debut until he hit that career home run number 700. It's insane. And it's really cool to kind of take a step back and not only appreciate his career, but think about the journey that you have been on, really right alongside him as a baseball fan. In episode 5, I had some fun tying in astrology and zodiac signs with the Major League Baseball headlines throughout the 2022 season. Now, I'm not super into astrology by any means, but it was a great way to learn more about it. So I give some background of, where it came from and what it means to us now and how I learned about all of that. And I tied in to all of the biggest baseball conversations around Major League Baseball in the 2022 season. So could we have predicted that, Tommy Pham was going to slap Jock Peterson? Maybe. It was written in the stars. Episode 7 was about a week after the Cardinals were abruptly eliminated from the playoffs after that magical, historic season. So many amazing moments in 2022. But they lost the first 2 games of the 3-game wild card series to the Phillies, in case you needed that reminder. So in this episode 7, we commiserated by sharing some historically huge flops, from Fire Festival to, the Cats movie and all the other things that just help us kind of process those complicated emotions over the way that last season ended, and hopefully put some perspective on it. Episodes 13 through 16 cover a lot of topical and timely things, from MLB free agency to the winter meetings, to the Cardinals signing Wilson Contreras, to my feelings on Steve Cohen and his approach to this season as the Mets owner. And that's particularly fun to listen to now, seeing how that's all played out. Yeah, I knew it all along. Episode 16, episode 15, I'm not sure. Check 13 through 16. It's in one of those. It's all there. In episode 22, we do a breakdown of the baseball statistic of WAR, or wins above replacement. There are so many stats in baseball, y'all. And I'm very into stats and analytics. I don't like looking at them exclusively to enjoy baseball. Like, there's definitely podcasts who kind of utilize that a little bit more exclusively or dive into it in every single episode. And that's, not us here at Peace, Love, and Baseball. But it is cool to talk about like what it is, how it came to be, why it's useful, and why you hear people talk about it. And just to have like that frame of reference, especially if it's not something that you're super into. What are the ones that we hear talked about a lot, and what do they mean to us? So we touch on that there with WAR in episode 22. Episode 24. Yeah. Okay. I'm about 6 months in here, and I'm starting to get a little bit more gutsy as the year went on, starting to block out the haters. So we give a little insight, some MLB headline hot takes on episode 24. I remember doing that and being like, I'm going to share my opinion. I'm going to say what I think, and who cares what people say? The people pleaser in me was having a tantrum inside. Anyway, episode 26 was our official 6-month half birthday episode, where I just talked about 6 random topics that I felt like talking about. And at least half of them were very baseball heavy. The new rules, spring training, the World Baseball Classic was just getting started. So some fun stuff to revisit there for sure. Episode 28, 29, and 30 are some of my favorite episodes, as we did preseason preview episodes focusing on some of our Central Division rivals. And we did the Cubs and the Brewers because I thought for sure those would be like, it'd be like the Cardinals, the Brewers, the Cubs. Those are the 3 at the top of the division, right? Well, we don't need to talk about how wrong that was. But in episode 28, we started with Justin, who is a Cubs fan from the podcast Baseball and Whatever. And he gave us an insightful rundown of his history as a Cubs fan and ultimately what to watch from his team in the upcoming year. So if the Cubs snuck up on you this year, and I think they did for all of us, go give Justin's episode a listen, because he had it all laid out for us there. And then on episode 29, we went head to head with the Brewers Babes, who have an awesome podcast. It's called The Brewers Babes. And we had an arbitration hearing, if you will, where we argued our sides for the Brewers and the Cardinals of which team was going to be more likely to win the Central Division. Because at this point, preseason, I think most writers and analysts had picked the Cardinals, but there were definitely some that were picking the Brewers, and I think we all pretty much agreed that they would probably be neck and neck, and not too different than it has been the last few seasons. And again, while we were terribly wrong, put that aside, we had a really fun back and forth where we were trying to convince our arbitrators of which team had the more likelihood of winning the division and who had the best starting pitching, who had the best infielders. And that was so much fun, even though now it's brutal for me to go back and listen to me trying to convince anyone which I truly believe that the Cardinals would run circles around the Brewers in 2023. But considering what has actually happened, Aaron and Lisa from the Brewers Babes are brilliant, and they do such a great job with their show. And it is really cool to learn about why they love their team and the things that have really ultimately set the Brewers up for success this year. And they predicted that all the way back in March. So check it out. And then, of course, episode 30 is our opening day episode where most of the audio is live coverage from opening day at Busch Stadium with Illinois' dad, Derek Pitzer, and Wesley McKinney of Validity. They are my opening day Busch Stadium buddies. I had so much fun making that episode, putting it together, and it's a super fun and special audio memento, honestly, to have from this season with two of my great friends. In episode 32, you will meet my co-host from the Babes podcast, and we play a little Peace, Love, and Baseball Jeopardy, which was a very fun format. I think I'm going to have to bring that back because it was a lot of fun. I actually liked how episode 33 turned out as well. This was one of the first weeks where I can remember being like, I don't really know what this week should be about. I'm looking for a little inspiration, not sure which direction this is really going to go. But this is where I really found that I could tie what was currently going on in baseball to these much bigger life conversations about, Kung Fu Panda. But really, it's got some decent content messaging there for you, I think. We also did another Show Me the Stats segment where we dove into the BABIP, or batting average on balls in play, statistic on that episode. Episode 35 is my 5 fixes for the 2023 St. Louis Cardinals. This was published about a week or so into the month of May. So things were already sad. So unexpected. And it also comes on the tails of the whole front office picking on Wilson Contreras drama. I can't even believe it was that long ago. It seems like, because it's, God, the writing was just on the wall, and I tried to ignore it for so long. But I actually re-listened to this one recently, and I still fully stand by it. So I still think Mo and Co. should value and take my unsolicited advice here in episode 35. In episode 37, we revisit some of the most dramatic moments of the 2023 season so far, along with some fun listener-submitted small-scale drama. So that was a fun one, especially if you don't necessarily keep up with other teams and the happenings around the league. We will fill you in on the juiciest dirt and what you need to know. Episode 39 is the first third of the season recap. So we had some listener votes submitted. I put out a Google form, a little survey, and I love doing stuff like that. So I will look for more opportunities to do stuff like that. But we had some listener votes submitted for the first third of the season awards, because we love awards. We love getting excited about awards. We love watching awards shows. And why should we only give them out once a year? So we do them 3 times a year here at Peace, Love, and Baseball. And in episode 46 then, so episode 39 is the first third of the season. Episode 46 is the 2/3 through the season awards and hot topics. And that is also the episode that I am joined by Wesley McKinney. We did it live. 1 hour post trade deadline. So we're talking about all of the headlines that are rolling in. And, it was very new and unexpected territory for Cardinals fans, but we highlight all the happenings around the league as well. In episode 41, we were joined by the lovely ladies of There Is Crying in Baseball, and that was the week after that they officially launched their new show. So we're joined by Rachel, Haley, and Sarah to relive some of the most emotional moments in baseball, and we had these gals rate them on the crying scale. I am also a guest co-host on There Is Crying in Baseball this week, so if you're not already following their show, make sure you're following them. I'm going to put that in the show notes for you here too. And tune in to tomorrow's episode on September 6th. Episode 42 is the London series recap, where you will hear all about my London series experience and beyond, and some live coverage of the games there too. So that was a lot of fun. And in episode 43, we did kind of in the similar vein of the Top 10 Dreamiest Dudes episode. We did an all-star studs draft with Susie from Bourbon and Baseball. She's an Astros fan. And Emily Nyman, who is a diehard Yankees fan from the Breaking Balls podcast. Two badass women who are so fun to talk baseball with. So that was a fun episode of where we highlighted, again, depending on, how closely you follow the rest of baseball or one team over another, it's just a good way to like get some good insight from people who really know what's going on, and also like fun to see different fan perspectives on how we perceive these players and their personas. I think I had a lot of fun talking with both of them and kind of hearing their takes on certain players that maybe they really love that I'm like, he kind of rubs me the wrong way. You can have him. So that was fun. Episode 44 is bad fan behaviors. We didn't list 44 of them, even though there are a lot. But, check yourself with that episode and just make sure that you are not, starting the wave or being mean to players on social media. Certainly not the same level of badness by any means, but, listen in to episode 44 for more on that. Episode 45 highlights just a few of the badass women who are working in baseball, from the front office to on the field as coaches to the media. And that was kind of centered around Women in Baseball Week, which was the week that episode 45 came out. And then a couple weeks later in episode 47, we had the privilege to interview Katie Woo of The Athletic, who is our beloved beat writer for the St. Louis Cardinals. And that was such a fun interview. It was a great way to get to know more about Katie, who is like such a figure in our social media lives, but also more about the profession of working in sports journalism. And then recently, we did similarly to the Pujols episode 3. In episode 49, we did an Adam Wainwright deep dive to celebrate, of course, the last season of his epic career. And we also kind of did a fun tie-in to share his love of music with a curated playlist that features a song, just like a good jam from each year of his career. So yeah. Whew. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the last year has been full of it all. Peace, love, and baseball. There are more fun and intriguing episodes and interviews in the works, but again, I thank you for listening, whether it's been 12 or 20 or 50 episodes. Thanks, Mom. I know you've been here for all 50. But I appreciate your time and your engagement more than you know. So please feel free to share your thoughts, your feedback, your wants and wishes for topics, for, experts that you'd like to hear from. I am here to seek them out, and I want to hear about it and learn from them too. So you can hit me up on Twitter, which is Twitter. I will never refer to it as anything else, and I hope you won't either. Stand strong. The resistance of, I'm not even going to say, it's Twitter. I'm on Twitter at KBirdTweets, KBURD. Oh, it's right here. KBirdTweets. Find me on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, you can find me on Instagram at peace.love.baseball. Or you can just simply shoot me an email at kbirdtweets@gmail.com. I think we're going to get on Facebook soon too, because we should. Why not? So stay tuned for an update with that. But until next week, Keep spreading the good word, my friends. Peace, love,